Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 233. Lord Lymington. Part 2. Firstly, a little on his wife and children. Sarah Jane was the daughter of Charles Irish and Martha Derriman, who'd married in September 1844 in South Petherton, Somerset, England. They had 11 children, with Sarah being the 8th child born. They emigrated by 1850. Sarah Jane did not remarry after her husband's death, and she died on the 8th of July 1910 in Petersham from breast cancer at the age of 51. Her gravestone reads, "Our Mother," and there's an inscription on the urn from her young Petersham friends. Their son Thomas Charles Miller, he was 13 when his father died and 24 when his mother died. He married Charlotte Elizabeth Teague on the 14th of January 1911 in Petersham. Charlotte died on the 20th of March 1917. They had no children together. He then married Alice Beatrice Fortunata Barda on the 29th of November 1919 at St Philip's in Sydney. They had 3 children together. Thomas was a builder and they lived in Enfield, and he died on the 7th of August 1978 at Wahroonga in New South Wales at the age of 92. And Thomas and Sarah Jane's daughter, Eva Clarice Miller, married John Henry Young on the 4th of September 1909 at the Congregational Church at Petersham. John Henry Young was the youngest son of the late E.W. Young of Petersham, and Eva in the marriage notice was mentioned as the only daughter of Mrs. T.W. Miller of Petersham. The bride entered the church with her grandfather, Mr. Thomas Miller, who gave her away. They had 3 daughters. John was a commercial traveller. In 1929, they travelled to England. By that time, John was a fine art dealer. John died in 1946. His death was announced in the Sydney Morning Herald on the 9th of September 1946. Mr. John H. Young, well-known connoisseur of art, died at his home at Cremorne on Saturday. He was 65. Mr. Young first became known to the art world in Sydney when he entered a picture framing business in the lane off Hamilton Street in the early 1920s. He founded the Macquarie Galleries with Basil Burdett, who was killed whilst working for the Red Cross during the war. An extensive visit to Europe widened Mr. Young's knowledge of art. On his return to Australia, he found his advice in demand by collectors and buyers of pictures. In his last years, he worked solely in the capacity of art director and cataloguer of the notable Australian collection. Mr. Young is survived by his wife and 3 daughters. And Eva died in April 1975 in Sydney at the age of 87. Who was Jenny Opie? Well, Jenny Opie, whose real name was Jane Opie, was born in Wallaroo, South Australia on the 24th of March 1871, so she was 8 years younger than Thomas. Jenny began singing at the age of 13. She's mentioned in September 1887 in the Adelaide Express and Telegraph as being a valuable addition to the ranks of the Adelaide contralto vocalists. And in a review, they say that Miss Jenny Opie well deserved the mark of favour with which her vocalisation was received. It was quite unnecessary to apologise for changing her song owing to a sore throat, and when she warbled out, "Won't you buy my pretty flowers?" the large audience, numbering over 2,000, were very pleased she'd chosen one of those simple yet always pleasing themes which appeal to the finer feelings of an everyday heart. They say Miss Opie will become a great favourite in musical circles. Her voice is not very powerful, but it's rich and full, and her manner is unaffected and pleasing. At the age of 19, she's mentioned in the Adelaide Evening Journal. Quintrell and Fisk combination. The Talented Company, by the invitation of the Countess of Kintore, visited Government House on Friday afternoon, and during their stay rendered several of their most pleasing selections to the evident satisfaction of the party present. In the evening they gave their farewell performance in the Town Hall before a large and enthusiastic audience, encores being demanded for almost every number. Miss Jenny Opie, a young lady vocalist who appeared in this city a few years ago, assisted in the concert by singing A Song Australia with a chorus by the Fisks. The lady has a voice of great power and of good quality in the middle register. And 2 months later, in Adelaide, Miss Jenny Opie bids fair to become one of the most popular performers on the concert platform. Her voice is a mezzo-soprano of good quality and great power. Her style is commendable and was proved by her singing Pinsatis, Never Forgotten, and Gabriel's When Sparrows Build, in which she gave an encore. And 3 weeks later in the Port Pirie Standard and Barrier Advertiser, the Quintrell family. This talented family appeared at the Institute Hall last evening to a well-filled house. Miss Jenny Opie created a very favourable impression and is bound to take a foremost position on the lyric stage. Her Song of Australia was rapturously applauded. Miss Opie is a pupil of Mr. Hosenroder's, and credit is reflected upon that gentleman. And in March 1891, in the Adelaide Quiz and Lantern, the many friends of Miss Jenny Opie, the well-known Cadena contralto, will be glad to learn that steps are being taken to enable her to complete her vocal education and training. It is her desire to proceed to Milan or some other European school of music, and there is little question that if she does so, and practices with assiduity that may be expected of her, she will take a high rank amongst the sweet singers of the day. In order that Miss Opie may be enabled to gratify her very laudable ambition, it is proposed to give a preliminary concert in Adelaide on the 1st of April, when all the leading musicians of the city will take part, and it's hoped that substantial assistance will then be rendered to the object in view. Miss Opie needs no other recommendation than that she is possessed of a remarkably good voice and that she is an Australian. 6 months later, in the Adelaide Quiz and Lantern, Dick Nishke, who left Adelaide at the same time as Miss Jenny Opie, both have joined the Stuart Walton Burlesque Company, has since the company disbanded in Brisbane been singing in popular concerts in the Queensland capital. And 2 months later, in the Adelaide Quiz and Lantern, Miss Jenny Opie, our South Australian contralto, has been engaged by Mr. J.C. Williamson in place of Miss Ida Osborne and will probably make her first appearance in the Merry Monarch. 2 weeks later, she made her first appearance in Melbourne in the Old Guard and was the understudy for Ida Osborne's parts. Jenny Opie spent much of her career touring Australia with J.C. Williams Company, and she also made 2 trips to India with the company. Mentioned that she scored a big hit as Abdullah in The 40 Thieves at Sydney Royal, and on the 28th of December 1891 in the Sydney Australian Star, an Abdullah of stately proportions was found in Miss Jenny Opie, a sweet singer and capable actress. And 4 months later, Miss Jenny Opie, who hails from Cadena and who's lately been on the operatic stage, is reported to be engaged to the son of an earl. It is expected that she'll shortly leave for England. The name of the lucky man has not transpired. And then on the 25th of March 1892, so a week later, in the same paper, Quiz and the Lantern learns that the marriage of Miss Jenny Opie and the Honorary Thomas W. Miller of the Hall, Southampton, England, was celebrated a week or 2 ago, and Mr. and Mrs. Miller will shortly visit Adelaide. On the 8th of April 1892, in the Kapunda Herald, so about 2 weeks later, the Cadena people are heartily sorry at the fate that's befallen Miss Jenny Opie, the talented daughter of a respected local resident. Miss Opie was a clever musician and dancer, and her ambition to be prominent on the theatrical stage was becoming realised when she met a man who called himself Lord Lymington. She evidently loved him, and when she left Adelaide a few weeks ago, some of her friends intimated she was presently going to marry the nobleman. This suspicious circumstance made other girls discontented with their lot. Why should they not go up on stage and marry noblemen too? The rest is a sad story. Miss Opie was wedded to her nobleman in Hobart. A day or 2 afterwards, Lord Lymington was arrested, charged with being an ordinary plebeian named Miller, who had deserted his family in Sydney. Now the girls who envy Jenny Opie are not so quite envious as they were. Wise mothers take the opportunity of wagging their heads at their daughters and warning them not to run after lords. But there is hardly one of the dear old souls who would not encourage a noble alliance, even if the evidence of the genuineness of the lord were not the strongest in the world. So 5 months later, on the 24th of September 1892, in the Cadena and Wallaroo Times, Miss Jenny Opie is prepared to instruct pupils in the art of singing at their private residences. Terms can be ascertained on application, personally or by letter. Exchange Hotel, Cadena. So she's gone back home. On the 31st of October 1892, in the Adelaide South Australian Register, Hudson's surprise party tonight, special engagement of Miss Jenny Opie. 3 years later, on the 16th of March 1895, in the Hobart Clipper in Tasmania. That naughty little Tootsie, Jenny Opie, who indulged in a high old time in Hobart as Lady Lymington, is going to matrimonially anchor onto her latest capture, a Victorian capitalist. On the 27th of March 1895 in the Borough Record in South Australia, grand entertainment by the ever-popular Quintrell family, special engagement and reappearance of Miss Jenny Opie, the South Australian contralto. And on the 26th of October 1895, over 3 years since the case in Tasmania and the bigamous marriage to Lord Lymington, she married in Rugby, South Australia to Isaac Killicote. On the 2nd of January 1896 in the Quislin Lantern in Adelaide. I have heard since I came back that handsome Miss Jenny Opie is no longer Jenny Opie but Mrs. Killicote, and that in all probability Mr. and Mrs. Killicote will shortly take up their residence at Cadina. Mr. Killicote is a banker, and I wish he and his wife long life and happiness. Isaac Killicote was 10 years older than Jenny. He was born at Coringa, South Australia. His father, Thomas Killicote, was born in England. Isaac's mother was Thomas Killicote's second wife, who he married in England, and Isaac was the only child of the family to be born in Australia. He was the youngest. They immigrated to South Australia in 1849. 2.5 years later, on the 17th of June 1898, in the Northern Argus, a Clare newspaper in South Australia, Captain Isaac Killicote, who has got into trouble over the National Bank accounts, who married some years ago to Miss Jenny Opie, a once popular Adelaide vocalist, is in the middle of a disaster, and it's come at a great shock to a large circle of friends. And on the 5th of August 1898, in the York's Peninsula Advertiser in South Australia, the case of Isaac Killicote. For the wife, mother and sister of Mr. Isaac Killicote, who was sentenced to 3 years' imprisonment with hard labour in the criminal court on Tuesday for embezzlement, I have the greatest sympathy. Mrs. Killicote's maiden name was Miss Jenny Opie, who made her name famous as a singer and actress on the Australian stage. Her father was not disposed to favour his daughter going upon the boards. Jenny had her own way, and an estrangement between father and daughter resulted. My readers probably know that the reconciliation was brought about through Miss Opie appearing with the company at Cadina and singing the song that reached my heart. It reached the heart of her father, who at once freely forgave his daughter. Poor Jenny Opie, fate is unusually cruel and relentless to her. Whilst in New Zealand she met a man, a thing who masqueraded in the guise of a man, and he won her girlish and loving heart and they were married. It turned out the man was already married, and his first wife appeared on the scene and prosecuted her husband for bigamy. He successfully passed himself upon Miss Opie as a man of rank, and so he was, a rank hypocrite. Returning to South Australia, Killicote was met by Miss Opie and he married her. So as a result of his incarceration, their marriage did not last and they separated, and by the 31st of August 1898, it's only a couple of weeks after that previous article about Isaac Killicote, in the Cadina and Wallaroo Times, a concert will be held in the town hall this evening in which Miss Jenny Opie is to sing. So she's gone back to her maiden name. She appeared as the Duchess of Della Volta in a revival of Le Fille des Tambours Major at the New Theatre Royal in Melbourne on the 8th of April 1905. In the Town and Country Journal in Sydney on the 26th of April 1905, it talks about the revival at the Theatre Royal of this play, and it said it was brought to close on Saturday night, the 22nd of April, after a successful run of a fortnight. It is of the simplest and most transparent kind, but it has bright rhythmical music and picturesque dressing and effective ensembles. The production was notable for its excellent chorus, some numbers of which had to be repeated each night. Miss Jenny Opie made a very handsome Duchess Della Volta, gowned first in a beautiful white satin ball dress trimmed with deep yellow roses, and afterwards in a most becoming russet brown velvet riding habit, a large brown velvet hat with an ostrich plume. From the summer of 1905, she spent 5 years in America, and she was in San Francisco at the time of the 1906 earthquake. She appeared in New York at Daly's Theatre from the 3rd of December 1906 to the 30th of March 1907 in the Belle of Mayfair as Lady Chaldercott. In the Sydney Sunday Sun on the 16th of December 1906, it mentions that an Australian actress, Miss Jenny Opie, is appearing with success in New York in the Belle of the Mayflower. Jenny had semi-retired from the stage from 1914, the year in which she advertised herself as the new proprietress of the Scotch Thistle Hotel in North Adelaide. She later became the licensee of the Botanic Hotel in Adelaide. In the Adelaide Mail on the 15th of June 1918, it mentions that Miss Jenny Opie of the Bing Boys Company and her sister Miss Vina Opie are staying at the Del Monte at Henley Beach. So she's still dabbling in a little bit of her creativity while she is a publican. Jenny and Isaac finally divorced in 1929. On the 3rd of July 1929 in the Adelaide Advertiser, alleging desertion, Jane Killicote, licensed victualler of North Terrace, Adelaide, sought a divorce from Isaac Killicote. The petition set out on the 26th of October 1898. The respondent left the petitioner and has since lived apart from her and without just cause or excuse left her continually deserted during 5 years or upwards, and the decree nisi was granted. Isaac did not marry, and it seems that he lived with his brother at St. Peter's, and this is where he died suddenly in July 1944 at the age of 83. On the 21st of January 1941 in the Adelaide Advertiser, Jenny Opie's ukulele. Yesterday, Miss Jenny Opie's musical voice called me from the Botanic Hotel to say that she wanted to give a ukulele as good as new to the 9th Australian General Hospital Band. Full of bright chit-chat as usual, Jenny told me how she bought the instrument a few years ago when she started taking lessons from Angelo de Medina. Said she, he always used to say how pretty I looked holding it in my hands. He would then take it in his and play it to me. I went on with lessons for a quarter but got fed up with it and didn't go on. Had I done so, Angelo predicted that I would get an appearance in Hawaii, but that was too far away, I told him. Besides, I wouldn't like to have to dress as they do. And on the 27th of August 1943 in the Kadina and Wallaroo Times, Mrs. J. Killicote of Prescott Terrace, Toorak Gardens, passed away in the Adelaide Private Hospital on the 15th of August. She was formerly widely known as the musical comedy actress Jenny Opie. She'd been ill for several months. Born at Kadina, Mrs. Killicote sang in public for the first time in the exhibition building at North Terrace at the age of 13. After training, she travelled throughout Australia with the J.C. Williamson Company, playing chiefly in comic opera. She spent 5 years in America and lost all of her possessions in the San Francisco 1906 earthquake. Mrs. S. King, Mrs. C. E. Davies and Miss Vina Opie are sisters and Mr. W. Opie a brother. Mrs. Killicote had no children. And a little more on Elizabeth Alardis. Elizabeth was born Elizabeth Dixon Alardis in 1877 in Shetland, Scotland. Her parents were John Alardis, a schoolmaster, and Elizabeth Taylor. By 1884, the family had emigrated to New Zealand, where John died at Dunedin in August 1893 at the age of only 49. Elizabeth was left with 4 children, the youngest being 7. Elizabeth was the oldest and 16 when her father died. Her mother commenced a relationship with George Dallas, quite likely in New Zealand. I cannot find a marriage record either in New Zealand or Australia for them, but they moved from New Zealand to Sydney by 1898. In 1899 is when Elizabeth and Tom Miller died, and the belief was that Tom Miller suggested that they go their separate ways, and the theory was by the police that when Miller found her dead with a bottle of poison beside her, and heartbroken, he took his own life as well. Several times Miller went to Lionsville with a woman whom he freely introduced as his cousin, his niece and his wife. To the manager of the mine, he introduced her as a particular friend of my wife's, calling her Miss Allardyce by name. On one occasion, Miller, meeting a friend of his who was requiring a governess, told him he could send him a good one, and accordingly Mrs. Allardyce was sent. But as Miller made a practice of going to see her every night, his friend began to get suspicious, knowing he was a married man, and the governess had to leave. In the Sydney Daily Telegraph on the 16th of March 1899, a stepfather's evidence. George Dallas, an engineer residing in Redfern, deposed that the woman whose corpse he'd seen lying at the morgue was his stepdaughter, Elizabeth Alardis. She was born in the Shetland Islands 21 years ago and had been in the colony for 4 years, with the exception of some months spent in New Zealand. She'd never married. Her mother resided in Redfern with the witness. The deceased had been in a situation as a barmaid and also a housemaid, but had generally lived with the witness. Her disposition was very lively and she'd been generally liked. Miller, the other deceased, used to come to the house in Redfern frequently during the last 12 months, and he took Elizabeth out several times. The witness formed a good opinion of him and was aware that the pair were going to Newcastle together. Miller said they would return home on Sunday night or first thing on Monday. Witness thought that his stepdaughter would be one of the last in the world to commit suicide. She thought too much of herself. Miller came to the house about 9 o'clock in a cab and asked to be allowed to take Lizzie to Newcastle. He was, he said, only going to stay one night and she would be all right. They went away together. Miller had given the girls small presents of jewellery and she appeared to treasure them very much and to at all times think a lot of him. They seemed to the witness to be sweethearts.
Their acquaintance extended over 2 years, but the witness could not say how it began. He was certain that the girl knew nothing of poisons. She was in Grafton about 6 months ago with Miller and was away a week. The witness did not know Miller was a married man. Water Police Constable Bell gave evidence in regard to the discovery of a diamond, ruby and pearl ring on the body of Miller, which he believed was the property of Miss Alatis. Dr. Harris deposed that when the bodies were found they were quite rigid, but not quite cold. Dr. Harris is of the opinion that both had been dead for several hours, the body of the woman being the colder, indicating she was the first to die. Several men who saw the women identified her as Miss Alatis, who was formerly employed in more than one hotel in Newcastle. The publicans of the Crown and Anchor Hotel and the Commercial Hotel identified the woman. Miss Alatis was an accomplished young woman, and several sheets of music found bore the name of L. Alatis. The body at the morgue was a woman of 25 years of age, 5 foot 1 or 2 inches in height, medium build, fair complexion with light brown hair, and rather prepossessing in appearance. On the 22nd of March 1899 in the Bligh Watchman and Coonabarra Brand Gazette, it mentions how her friends knew she went to Newcastle with Miller, but apparently did not know the relations between them, and her friends certainly didn't know that he was married. On the 17th of March 1899, it has an article on her funeral in the Sydney Daily Telegraph. The remains of Miss Elizabeth Alatis, one of the victims of the Newcastle tragedy, whose body was claimed and brought to Sydney by George Dallas, her stepfather, was interned yesterday. Only the members of the family and a few of the deceased's former friends attended.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.